July. For many days, Miss Rosalie and the other teachers have been preparing us for the Independence Day celebration. Some students learn poems. Some students learn songs. I make a banner. The older students will recite part of the Declaration of Independence. On Independence Day, everyone gathers in the open space on the other side of classrooms in Block 7. Ron says that there are plans to build an auditorium in that open space. Mr. Warden is there. My island neighbors from Block 3 are there. People from all of the blocks are there, students, parents, grandparents. I think I have never seen so many people in one space before. Miss Rosalie told us that there are now almost 10,000 people living in this prison village. 10,000 people with hair and skin like mine. 10,000 people with Japanese names like mine. Students line up in front, facing the parents and grandparents. I stand next to Kimmy. Mr. Warden motions to one of the teachers to begin. The teacher nods and a high school student steps forward. "Salute," he shouts above the crowd. All of the students salute. But I feel nervous when I see that some adults in the crowd do not salute. "Pledge," the high school boy shouts. Students recite the Pledge of Allegiance, but I feel nervous when I see that many adults in the crowd do not pledge. Maybe they do not know the Pledge of Allegiance, or maybe they do. Mr. Warden must not see them, though, because he doesn't leave his spot. After the pledge, he reads a quick speech from a paper. But the wind starts to blow and dust fills my ears, so I cannot hear his words. After the ceremony, school is dismissed for lunch and the crowd shrinks. We go back to our own blocks, back to our own barracks. Ron walks me to lunch, the wind pushing our arms and legs towards the mess hall. On the other side of the road that separates Block 3 from Block 9, some men huddle in the shadows of one of the barracks. These men are city men, not from our island. Ron sees me staring. "Come," he says, but then he stops and looks. I can see what he sees. Some of the wild boys from his class are lurking on the edges of the men in the shadows. "Go to lunch, Manami," Ron says. My stomach tightens. I do not want to leave Ron alone with these men and these wild boys. Ron gently pushes my back. "I'll be there in a minute," he says. I walk as slowly as I can, looking over my shoulder at the shadow group. As Ron nears them, I see a man give a piece of paper to one of the wild boys. The paper gets crumpled and shoved in. I am too far to hear Ron's conversation with the wild boys, but I hear some words. "Lunchtime. Go to the mess hall." I'm relieved when I see Ron walk away from that group, a few of the wild boys slinking behind him. The wind has not stopped blowing for more than a week. It is heavy and hot and dry. Island winds can be heavy too, but they are cool and wet. Island winds coat my face with tiny beads of water. This wind pelts my face with dust. It glues my eyelashes closed until Mother presses a warm, wet cloth on my eyes to clean the dust away. It powders my hair until Mother brushes the dust free with her long, strong strokes. It layers my tongue and my throat, too much for Mother to clean out. Not even 2 cups of hot water from the teapot can clean that out. But just below the howl of the wind, I can hear another sound. It is not quite a whimper and not quite a growl. It is something in between. Eugen is out there in the dusty wind. I hear him when I walk to the water pump in the morning. I hear him when I sit in the garden. I hear him while I wait at the mess hall for Mother. I am afraid for Eugen. What if no one let him out of that crate? What if he is roaming the streets looking for me? What if he found a ferry boat to the island and is waiting at our house because Pastor Rob does not know that he has returned? And the worst, what if he followed the train tracks and is lost in the dusty wind? When Miss Rosalie hands me a paper at the end of the school day, I get an idea. If the wind is strong enough to carry my letter to Ron, then maybe it is strong enough to bring Eugen. When I get home, I draw Eugen on a piece of paper. I do not know what he looks like now, so I draw him as I last saw him, shoved into a crate. I draw his eyes and his ears and his tail, his mouth open and barking, his paws pawing against the crate. I fill the drawing with promise words. "Come, Eugen, and I will give you an extra bowl of rice and chicken. Come, Eugen, and we will run until we fall down. Come, Eugen, and you can sleep in my bed." In the morning, I rise early. I water Mother's garden and check each of the plants. Since the rainstorm, they have grown tall again. Then I walk past Block 3 towards the administration buildings. I walk behind the buildings until there is nothing but dirt and sky between me and the fence that surrounds the prison village. I hold up my picture of Yujin and make a wish, raising my arms high above my head. The wind flaps the paper. Then it rips it from my hand, carrying it over the fence. I watch the paper until it is too far away to see. I have added my paper promises to the air. After school, I draw another picture of Yujin. This time, I draw him as he looks hidden beneath my coat, his panting tongue, his wide-open eyes, crouched and quiet. I write more promise words on this drawing. Come, Yujin, come. We will take long walks and wrap up in a blanket together. The next morning, when I release this drawing into the wind, it flies higher than yesterday's paper. Every day I draw Yujin. Some days it is one picture, some days it is more. Yujin running on the sand, Yujin sleeping under grandfather's chair, Yujin watching seabirds dip and bob, Yujin waiting by the door. Each morning I make a wish for Yujin to come and I send new promises into the air. After 10 and then 20 and then 30 drawings, I wonder, one of my pictures should have found Yujin by now, so why hasn't he come? I draw one last picture, Yujin and grandfather, sitting side by side on their rock at the beach. The ocean is in front of them, the sun behind them. This will be the one, I think. This will be the one that brings Yujin back. When I release this picture the next morning, I do not write a promise. I write a message instead. I'm sorry, Yujin, I'm sorry. I hold it up high. Then I jump and throw it into the wind. Wind and dust and tears fill my eyes. I scrub at them with my sleeve and run home. People, on their way to work, pass Mother's garden and into our room. I drop at the floor at grandfather's feet. I wrap my arms around his legs and try to speak, but my throat is still closed. I want to tell him I am sorry. I want to ask him to forgive me, but no words come out. I know you miss Yujin, grandfather says. I miss him too. I cry until I feel grandfather's hand on my head. I look up and he moves his hand to my cheek. I scrub at my eyes again. I know you are sorry, grandfather says. I am sorry too. Ron has already left for school and classes have started, but my heart feels like flying when grandfather takes my hand and walks me to the school. That night, grandfather and Ron and I sit at a long table in the mess hall. Grandfather leans his head towards Ron, who is speaking to him. There is no mention of secrets in Ron's words, so I stop listening. Instead, I keep my eyes fixed on the entrance to the kitchen. This is the first time that grandfather has come to the mess hall. Mother does not know about grandfather's decision, and I want to see her when she learns. Mother comes out balancing a teapot and cups. She takes several steps before she sees. Then she stops walking. I touch grandfather's arm. Ron stops talking. Mother starts walking. She sets the teapot and cups on the table. I can see the tears on her cheeks. I also see her smile. It's a small smile, a quiet smile. But this is the first smile that I have seen on Mother's face since we left the island behind. Father, Mother says, you're here. Grandfather nods. I am here. I lift the teapot to pour hot water into the cups, but Mother stops my hand. Wait, she says. She leaves the table, walking so quickly that she's almost running. She leaves the mess hall. In a few minutes, she returns carrying a bowl and a cup, as well as a small sack in her arms. Mother sits at the table and places the teapot in front of her and one cup next to it. She sets the bowl to her left. She bows over the table. I remember this from the island. It is a special ceremony to honor a special moment. Mother is preparing tea. Grandfather sits up straight. Ron and I place our hands on our laps. Many pieces of the ceremony are missing. There is no special mat to cover the table. Instead, Mother folds her napkin and sets it on the table. There is no special tea set, but Mother pours water into the cup in front of her, swirling it around to clean it, before pouring it into the empty bowl. She dries the cup with a napkin. There is no special tea powder to whisk into boiling water. Instead, Mother shakes the last of the tea leaves from the sack in the teapot. She pours the weak tea from the teapot into the cup. She holds the cup on her palm and then places it on the table in front of Grandfather. Grandfather holds the cup in his palm and sips. He sips again before placing the cup on the table. Then he takes a napkin and wipes the rim of the cup. Ron takes the cup in his palm and sips. After he has the cup on the table and wipes the rim, it is my turn. I am careful to do as Mother has taught me. I place the cup on the palm of my left hand and raise my palm to my chest. I sip slowly. This weak tea washes the dust from my throat. Perhaps tonight I will find my voice. Father joins us in the room earlier than usual this evening. He looks excited. I remember the last time Father looked excited. It was when he pulled Kiko's letter from his pocket. This was many Eugen pictures ago. I think about this morning's picture, the picture with a message. I wonder how long it will take for that picture to reach Eugen. This time, Father does not pull a letter from inside his shirt. This time, he pulls something small and furry and brown from inside his shirt. He places it on the floor of our room. This dog needs a home, Father says. I saw him by the administration building. He's little, like Eugen. I thought maybe it would help. Maybe bring back Manami's voice. I asked a soldier if we could have the dog. The soldier said that the dog didn't belong to anyone. It just wandered through the gate. He said I could have it. My heart starts to beat so hard that I think it might be out of my chest. Ron pets the dog. Mother brings a bowl of water. Hello, Grandfather says. He smiles when a pink tongue licks his hand. I hear Father's laugh and see Grandfather's smile. Mother looks up at me and her smile freezes. She reaches towards me. Manami, she asks, do you want a dog? I do not want a dog. I want my dog. I want Eugen. The wind gave my message to the wrong dog. If this dog got Eugen's message, then how will Eugen find me? I want to explain, but my throat closes tight, too tight for words to get out, too tight for air to get in. I run outside to Mother's garden. I sit on the ground between the mounds of zucchini and cilantro. I touch the thickening stems. I touch the handprint-shaped leaves. My throat begins to open just a little bit, just enough for the air to get in. I close my eyes when I see Father walk out the door carrying the dog. The next morning, I see the dog following behind Kimmy's mother. At school, Kimmy tells me how happy she is that my father gave them the dog. I want to be happy for Kimmy, but I cannot smile. After a minute, I merely nod.